The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Wrestlemania Sunday, which is now turned into Wrestlemania early Monday morning here on the Nerdcast Empire. And what a night of Wrestlemania it was. If you have not checked out our podcast from night one, you can do that at this time. But we are ready to talk about night two of WrestleMania, and an unbelievable show tonight. And got the whole crew back again to talk about night number two. Joining me in studio is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going pretty well. Was that the greatest WrestleMania of all time? Who's to say?
It's certainly in the running, no question about that. Obviously, recency bias would almost make you say yes, but we'll discuss that as this podcast goes on. Also in studio tonight is Rachel. Rachel, how's it going?
It's just been fun. That's been the theme pretty much.
It's funny, the thought crossed my mind before I introduce our third compadre. There are a lot of nights where we've had these big pay-per-view events, and WrestleMania even, and the pizza was the highlight of the night. And Terry's Pizza is wonderful. Shout out to Terry's Pizza for
tonight.
Terry.
Yay.
Did a great job as always. But tonight, the wrestling actually lived up to the billing of one of these big events. Joining us from parts unknown is Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Going pretty great. Eat your heart out night one. Can't wait to talk about whether or not bloodline rules made a difference. Talking about our pro wrestling cards, obviously not Roman and Cody.
Well, and certainly Chris almost was able to beat the entire Sexton bloodline, but acknowledge me. Mike was able to come through and get the win at the end, and certainly a good night again for our pro wrestling scorecards, and great night for wrestling tonight as WrestleMania Night 2 certainly delivered on all the things that we hoped it would and more. We're going to get into the individual matches, of course, starting with the main event, but before we do that, just kind of want to go around the horn and kind of get everybody's thoughts about what they thought of specifically night two. I mean, I think you do kind of have to judge the two nights together because, as Triple H said, night one really did set up night two. But in all the years we've been doing this, where we've been watching WrestleMania, and we've been watching them for years and years, it's hard to remember one that left you feeling as good for as many people. I mean, you've had those moments where it ended on a good note and everybody goes home happy, but it just feels like there's so many people that had that moment tonight that you feel really good for. Mike, we'll start with you. Where does this rank as far as WrestleManias and big pay-per-view events of all time?
It has to be somewhere near the top. I don't know if I'm in a position right after it to say definitively that that's the case, but I think we've entered a point now where I actually feel happy just for the people to be a part of WrestleMania, regardless of what role they play. The show felt that big where you're like, that's cool that you got to be a part of this, even if you were just, part of the Final Testament, Lashley Street Profits match, even something like that. It's like, you're a part of WrestleMania. That's great.
Or the streamer dude that got trashed in the Prime Energy bottle. Or
yeah, I'll never know any of Logan Paul's flunkies. I understand that's a me problem because I'm old and I don't pay attention to that stuff. But cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, it definitely felt that way. Cool to watch it, I think. And I think the 72,000 that were there tonight certainly gonna never forget where they were. Rachel, your thoughts on the event overall?
I think it easily probably one of the best WrestleManias we've ever watched. I mean, again, maybe recency bias. Even comparing it to like the last few that they've had, the 2-night WrestleManias, like we've always really enjoyed night one. It's been good, maybe not perfect, but good. And then second night always just leaves you kind of wishing for something more, or it just doesn't go the way you expect. Tonight was just perfect. I feel like all the people won that needed to win, and all the matches were great, and it was exciting. It kept our attention. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, it was a really, really great show. Chris, your thoughts on WrestleMania Night 2?
Yeah, I know we talked about it before we started recording, but I mentioned that if this was all of WrestleMania by itself, just night two, I think it would have served pretty well, even on its own. Not a bad match across the board. And like Mike said, it's definitely up there on one of the best WrestleManias of all time, if not the best. I think we definitely have to plan a podcast to talk about some of the greatest, just to kind of see where this one ranks.
Yeah, no question about it. Maybe give it a few weeks to kind of settle in and then go back and start looking at some of the best WrestleManias of all time. But we're going to start talking about night number 2 of WrestleMania, and we're going to start at the end. And it was the main event under Bloodline rules. It was the champion for 1,316 days, Roman Reigns, taking on Cody Rhodes. trying to finish his story for the second year in a row. And this time, with a little help from his friends, Cody Rhodes indeed was able to finish his story in just over 33 minutes by hitting 3 crossroads in the ring and getting the pin and finishing the story and winning the championship. It involved Jimmy and Jey Uso coming out at first. Solo Sikoa came out. He was confronted by John Cena, who was then confronted by The Rock. And it looked like The Rock was going to get his revenge again on Cody and be able to beat him up. And then the gong hits and the Undertaker shows up and the Undertaker takes him out, and then they vanish into thin air. And then Seth Rollins takes the chair shot from Roman Reigns, which allows Cody to recover and eventually hit the crossroads and the win to win his first world championship in WWE, something that his father was not able to do, to win that particular title, which eluded Dusty during his career. And then obviously very emotional aftermath with his family and friends and fellow baby faces from the locker room carrying him around the ring, and emotional embrace with Bruce Pritchard and with Triple H. And obviously his wife Brandy was the first one on the scene. Just a very emotional moment that was only added to in the post-match press conference, we'll get to a little later. But we'll start with Mike with his overall thoughts on an amazing run by Roman Reigns, an amazing, overbooked, wild championship match that ended with Cody Rhodes finally having his hand raised.
They did it. I remember sitting here a year ago, just beyond flabbergasted, I suppose, that they didn't have Cody win, and in my mind trying to justify it, like, well, he really just kind of came back to WWE. Maybe they really do want to have him, run the gauntlet, so to speak, before doing it. And then you had the Raw after WrestleMania, which just brought it down to an all-time low, and just the uncertainty. And then you think they're back on the right track, and then The Rock gets implanted into the situation. There were so many reasons to think that maybe they really weren't going to get it right this time. And honestly, this might be the greatest, grossly overbooked match I've ever seen in my life. It had callbacks as far as, Cena getting back at Solo Sikoa for getting murdered by him, essentially. You had Rollins taking the chair shot that he gave to Roman. Everything about it hit all the right notes, and they had the finish correct.
Yeah. And again, you just wondered if we were going to get to this point and they were going to get it right. And really just everything lined up for them perfectly. Some of it might have been a little bit of luck along the way, that it just kind of fell in that order to be able to tell the story right. But there was also a lot of planning. I think it dated back even a few months that they kind of started the work toward this finish. But Rachel, your thoughts on the main event?
It was perfect. I mean, I said before it started, I'm like, what I wanted to feel with the main event was the same way I wanted to feel after All In when we went to Chicago. And I mean, before All In, I didn't care about Cody really at all, but they made me care about him winning the belt from Nick Aldis. That's what I wanted to feel tonight. And that's what I thought I would feel last year. And then we kind of got left hanging. It was the perfect ending of the story. I loved even all the craziness with all the people coming in, and then the entrance alone, like Cody's entrance was phenomenal with his mask and Brandy out there. It was everything I hoped it would be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Chris, of course, watching from Parts Unknown tonight, definitely want to get your thoughts as well on Cody Rhodes getting a chance to finish the story tonight.
It's a beautiful montage of storytelling. I don't want to call it the Triple H storytelling, because as he pointed out in the press conference, it's not just his era, it's everybody's era, and everybody had a part in it. And I think when you were leading into this story that you told someone, all right, this is going to involve John Cena, The Rock, Undertaker, all these bloodline members, Cody Rhodes, like everybody would just be questioning, how are you going to weave all this together? But they managed to do it. And like Mike said, this is more than just 1 year or 2 years in the making from the last WrestleMania. It's more than just a father-son kind of moment between Cody and his father. You have moments that date back to almost a decade with that Seth Rollins chair shot costing Roman the title. You have Cena and The Rock in the ring for the first time in close to a decade as well. I mean, just all these callbacks, and it's just an amazing web that they've woven. And like just the perfect result from it all. They nailed it.
Something I mentioned live, and kind of get Mike's thoughts on this as well. Rachel, of course, mentioned All In, and that was Cody winning the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship from Nick Aldis, and the build to that and how well they set that up. The end of the event, before they go off the air, with all the baby faces in the ring and the legends and Triple H and Bruce Pritchard and Cody with the microphone, it really harkened back to the end of All In with the Bucks and Omega and Cody and all those guys in the ring, basically promising a new era of wrestling, a new revolution, if you will. And ironically, all these years later, here's WWE, the gorilla in the room, if you will, the giant elephant, the industry leader that is now sitting in these press conferences and sitting there in the ring and promising a new era of professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is cool. I love professional wrestling, not accidentally said by the commentary team at the end, making it very clear that a new era of World Wrestling Entertainment is going forward, whatever you want to call it. It's ironic that now it's WWE that is the cool product. It is WWE that is wanting to take you places you didn't even know that professional wrestling could go. Wasn't lost on me at the end of that event, and I would have to assume it's for those of us who were there, you probably feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you think that when Cody originally left, everyone, with the exception of maybe one person, understood why he did and didn't hold any grudge against him for feeling like, hey, I need to get away and do something different. Because the people in the ring tonight, it almost felt like they were survivors of a really bad relationship, abusive, maybe, if you want to go there. But it just seemed like, hey, we've steered the ship out of the storm. Congratulations, guys, we've done it. And I think Triple H kind of even mentioned that to some degree during the press conference, basically saying, the guys who stuck with us through this year or so. And I think really even farther back, like these are the people that have emerged victorious and people who probably wanted the industry to change and the product to change. And now they're in a situation where they can actually see that vision come to life, and maybe pro wrestling isn't a bad word.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hotter than ever, especially WWE wrestling. But, Rachel, one thing Triple H said too, along those lines in the press conference talking about Cody. And Mike mentioned specifically, there was one guy that didn't understand. You hear Triple H's comments and you know that he was one of the people that understood why Cody had to leave when he said he went down one road until it was closed. And then he went down another road and then it was closed. And then he went out and made his own road because that was the only path he had to try to get to where he wanted to get to. But in the end, it was always about coming back to WWE. You see, and we followed this journey for Cody for a lot of his independent run all the way up to now. You see that it's kind of crazy to watch him go down these paths and get to this point tonight.
I mean, even him saying like the whole undesirable to undeniable. And that's what his whole journey has been, from where he just was Stardust, not happy, not wanting to be there, to him making his own journey and doing it his own way and getting back to where, I feel like still, like you said, end game was going to be WWE. It was just a matter of how to get there and how to get to where he wanted to be in that company. And he's done it. Yeah,
it's amazing that he has finally got there. Kind of a final thought for tonight, and I'm sure we're going to spend more time on podcasts going forward discussing all of this, because I have a feeling that there's going to be more and more things come out as this company turns directions. But I do want to let Chris kind of have the final word on this, and I would like to kind of steer the conversation a little bit towards Roman Reigns. You have Roman Reigns, who is continuing to battle leukemia, is continuing to take medication for it. He has been the champion for 1,316 days, and obviously he's been a heel. He's had some matches that weren't the best. And again, I think Vince had a lot to do with some of the really crappy booking that he kind of had to suffer through as a champion, because they didn't want him to lose. They didn't know how to set up a challenger to beat him. But for him to represent the company as the head of the table, to go from the guy who was getting dog food poured on him by Baron Corbin to this guy who, as Triple H said tonight, if he's not the greatest of all time, he's certainly among the greatest of all time. I think maybe a few words on the man who has carried WWE and kind of set them up for this new era. And, you saw the embrace on social media with Paul Heyman, kind of maybe a feeling of relief that he's now handed this off to Cody, and then we'll see what kind of moves forward. But Chris, your thoughts on Reigns and this wild and crazy title run, which we'll probably never see again in our lifetime.
I'm glad you brought this up, because I was sitting here racking my brain, anticipating you were going to ask us all who the MVP of the night was, like we did last night. And
I will.
Well, to get mine out of the way, mine is going to be Roman Reigns. At first, I kind of felt like maybe I'm cheating just because of his reign, but then I thought about it a little bit more, and I absolutely used to hate Roman Reigns just back in the days of him being the baby face that they were trying to hand off the company to after John Cena, and just kind of Superman punch spear, he wins over and over again, and the kind of the feeling that he wasn't ready to inherit it all. And yet here he is as a heel, the heel. He has bridged the gap between the McMahon era, as you said, some of the horrible booking decisions that kind of plagued him, come back from those days and gone all the way into this Triple H era, had one of the most monumental reigns of all time while battling leukemia. And as much as we talk about Cody Rhodes and how happy we are for him, this storyline doesn't happen, or at the very least, it doesn't matter if Roman Reigns doesn't handle this storyline and all the others that tie back, the Seth Rollins chair shot storyline, all of these things he's handled throughout his career as well as he has. So definitely my MVP for the night, amazing reign. And I have the most appreciation for Roman Reigns that I have ever had by far. And like I said, this is coming from someone who used to absolutely despise him.
We all acknowledge the tribal chief and his efforts, and has set WWE up in a good place and has set Cody Rhodes up into a good place into starting his title run, and what's going to come of that and what changes there are going to be. We're going to find out over the days and weeks to come, and we'll certainly be chronicling it on this podcast. But an amazing main event that wrapped up the show. We've got other matches to talk about. We're going to hit the lightning round for the next two before we head to our first break. And we're going to start off with the triple threat match for the U.S. Championship. It was Logan Paul with his Prime Energy bottle and his Prime Energy truck and his Prime Energy cannon at the back of his truck, taking on Randy Orton and Kevin Owens, who had just a golf cart, which was pretty funny watching them zoom down the ramp. Really good match, as you would expect with those three. In the end, it was Logan Paul retaining the U.S. Championship, kind of escaping with a win. Again, a little bit underhanded means, but a really outstanding triple threat match. Mike, you're going to be the one in the lightning round for this one. Your thoughts on that triple threat?
Great match. I enjoyed it thoroughly from the entrances. I mean, the Prime Energy truck was ridiculous. The golf cart, and then Owens backing it all the way back up the ramp to pick up Orton to bring to the ring. Just such a ridiculous idea. And I mean, Randy Orton's a legend. He shouldn't have to walk all the way down the ramp anyway. I love that, like, they kind of acknowledge that both Orton and Owens are kind of scumbags. So, like, even though they had this tentative alliance, like, you knew they were just kind of waiting on which one would kind of screw the other one first. Owens caught Orton trying to RKO him, and then they just kind of have this discussion about, okay, we're going to fight each other now. Yeah, let's go and fight each other now. Like, very, very weirdly civilized about their underhanded tactics. Logan Paul is just so obnoxiously good. I have to think there are so many people toiling away on the independent circuit that hate that guy, because in short order, he's shown that he can kind of do a lot of the stuff they do, and also have millions upon millions of followers. Just to give him that desirability for a company like WWE, he's going to bring eyes to the product. Otherwise, anytime he has a stooge, like I mentioned before, I never know who it is, but anytime you have someone in a giant drink costume, it's going to be entertaining. I wasn't really sure how this match was going to go, but you can't argue with Logan Paul having a title.
Especially with big international events coming up. He's going to be on every one of those international premium live events they've got coming up. So that's going to be big crowds to show up to try to boo him out of the building. How about we do Baron Corbin versus Logan Paul in France? Because, of course, Baron Corbin is over as a baby face in France for some reason.
As he should be.
So
Wolf Dogs
forever. We'll talk about that on next week's podcast, with the Wolf Dogs retain their tag team championships at NXT Stand and Deliver. But now we're going to move on to the match that I knew who I was going to give this to in the lightning round. It was LA Knight versus AJ Styles. And really, there's only one choice as far as giving somebody this match, and that is our resident LA Knight super fan, Chris. Chris, tell us about Knight and Styles.
Yeah. Man, they had me invested with all the promos leading up to it. I was more invested in this fight than I was the Usos, who have an actual blood brother relationship. But they were in a tough spot. I mean, every match after this was going to be a championship match. They're given kind of the dead center as far as time to get this match done. And you risk this being kind of the bathroom break match if nobody took one during the 6-man tag match. So kind of a toss up between those. And despite all that, they put on an amazing match, came out with a quick start, just like the Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins match that we'll get into. But that's kind of the start you would expect from the feud they were having. So it was very believable that they jump right into the action and almost immediately end up outside. But aside from that, had a healthy mix of fast-paced action and methodic action. You knew it wasn't going to be match of the night, but even still, they gave it everything they had. Props to AJ Styles. This was kind of a classic match. Most of the other matches, you had people hitting, 4 or 5 of their finishers and just kicking out every time. Whereas LA Knight hits 1 BFT over. I don't think we saw a single successful Styles clash, and I can't really recall, but I don't even know if he hit a successful phenomenal forearm. So for them to have, the better part of a 12-minute match and most of the major offense coming from LA Knight, AJ Styles really putting him over in this one on LA Knight's first WrestleMania, biggest WrestleMania of his life so far. At over 40 years old, this was a phenomenal match. No pun intended.
Yeah, totally agree. I think we all kind of agree with that. Two great guys in the ring, and great to see them have that spotlight and make the most of it. And I think LA Knight certainly potentially in position to challenge at least for a mid-card title. We have Logan Paul still the U.S. champion. Obviously, we have a new Intercontinental champion in Sami Zayn. And then obviously with the world championship situation, we have at least one new world champion. We're going to tell you on the other side of the break if we have 2 new world champions on the night, because we're going to talk about Rollins and McIntyre coming up after the break, along with Bayley and Iyo Sky. And that 6-person tag match will wrap up the night on what was a wild and amazing night for night 2 of WrestleMania. We'll step aside and talk about some more matches on the other side of this timeout here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, night 2 of WrestleMania. The entire crew with us again tonight to talk WrestleMania. Don't forget to check out our website at nerdcastempire.com. Don't forget to check out our store while you are there, nerdcastempire.com/store. In less than 12 hours time, it is another episode of Music Monday. And I think this may be our best episode yet. We had 6 phenomenal new albums that came out this week. We actually had more than that, but the 6 we chose I thought were among some of the best albums we've had all year long. So check that out. That'll be coming out in just a few hours on the Nerdcast Empire. So make sure you tune in to Music Mondays. Next week, we're going to be talking the best of the rest of WrestleMania. We're going to talk about the Raw after WrestleMania. We'll talk about the NXT pay-per-view, some of the indie shows we were able to catch. And of course, a week from today, as it turns out, will be another episode of Music Monday when we will be able to talk about the music from March the 29th. Going to continue on now with the match that opened the show. It was Seth freaking Rollins defending his World Heavyweight Championship against Drew McIntyre with CM Punk on guest commentary. It was pretty funny to watch Punk kind of crap on all the entrances as they came out, and certainly kind of crapped on both competitors as well, but then really settled in, I think, as the match went on. Really good match between those two. Chris was talking before the break about spam finishers. This was definitely a match that had that. McIntyre hitting a Claymore right out of the gate. In the end, it was Drew McIntyre getting the win in 10 minutes and 33 seconds. He ends up winning the World Heavyweight Championship in front of fans after not getting to do so during the pandemic era. So certainly that meant a lot. And he went out and celebrated with his family, but then just could not resist going over and rubbing it in CM Punk's face, and really good stuff there that I wasn't sure was going to lead to anything. But finally, Punk had had enough. He trips up McIntyre on the table. He pulls off his arm brace. He beats him down with it, continues to stomp on him. And then Damian Priest music hits, and Priest comes down to the ring with a referee, cashes in his Money in the Bank contract, and wins the World Heavyweight Championship. The first wrestler of Puerto Rican descent since Pedro Morales 50 years ago to win a world title in WWE. Just amazing. We've talked about All In earlier. I just think about seeing Punishment Martinez selling his wares at the dealer room, and all these years later, he's now a world champion in WWE. We're going to start off with Rachel on this one. Another really great match that told a great story, even in only 10 minutes. And then, of course, we had everything that happened after the match, which was just cinema almost.
The match was fantastic. I mean, there were some of the sequences where Seth was trying to do the stomp and it wouldn't work out, but it looked like poetry in motion, him trying to move. I was excited for Drew. I really think he deserved that moment since he was screwed out of it back in the pandemic era. But I cannot wait to see where they go with him and CM Punk, because obviously that's going to be a thing now. And like you said, I'm happy about Damian Priest, because seeing him at All In, you go down the hallway and they're there and he's just larger than life. You hear his voice and it's so like thundering. So seeing him actually get his flowers too. And after like during the press conference talking about he was homeless however many years ago and now he's here. It's just amazing.
Yeah, crazy story, honestly. Like you said, homeless 10 years ago, very much on the indies, wrestling Jay White. I don't know how many times during that one season of Ring of Honor. I feel like every time we turned it on, those two were wrestling. And certainly it's worked out really well for Damian Priest, who's now the world heavyweight champion. We're going to throw it to Chris next. Chris, your thoughts on the opening match of the night?
This was a brilliant way to start off night number 2. I mean, with Seth Rollins and all the work that he's put in to make this championship mean something, and then just the Drew McIntyre persona that he has developed, we need to protect him. Finally getting his flowers for a split second. I like to think there was a discussion, because, I mean, Drew McIntyre was probably second in line for me behind Roman Reigns as far as MVP with just the character he's created. But I like to think that there was a discussion like, hey, look, this isn't going to be exactly what you wanted tonight, but you've put in so much work that down the road you will get yours. But let's do this for the story for right now. Let's get this Money in the Bank out of the way. And it's kind of perfect, because he has built himself to where he is in between. He can be fighting a face, he can be fighting a heel. It doesn't matter. He is just that good, and quite possibly better than most of the roster. So excited to see where he goes. I really do hope he gets a real reign down the road, but also happy for Damian Priest, getting to listen to him and how grateful he was during the press conference and kind of just opening up about how far he's come. I think it was great for everybody. And thank you to Seth Rollins for making this all possible over the last, however many days he held that championship.
And I certainly hope that Seth Rollins is going to get some time to heal up now completely. Obviously, he was dealing with a knee injury that forced him to kind of do some rehab and kind of be off limits there for a few weeks leading up to WrestleMania, but certainly carried his part, certainly last night in the tag match. And then, of course, in the opener tonight and even in the closing match as well to kind of do what he needed to do. And a guy who absolutely made that title seem important in a very short period of time. But Mike, your thoughts on that opening match and the aftermath?
Yeah, before the shenanigans happened with CM Punk and Damian Priest, there was kind of that moment where you had Rollins looking back at McIntyre after McIntyre won, and you kind of feel this like heartfelt connection between the two, where it was like, there you go, man. You earned it. You've done all this. Here's your moment with the crowd. And I thought that was really cool. I also think, even though we were maybe critical of having Rollins in that whole tag team match at the end of night 1, I think that just set you up perfectly for what ended up being kind of a race to the finish in the second match. Like, I don't know if we would have been content with a 10-minute match if Rollins hadn't wrestled the night before. Yeah, what can I say about McIntyre's work right now? The dude, Triple H mentioned during the press conference how difficult it is to create a really good baby face. And I think sometimes that's because they just don't know how to create a really good heel. And I think so often the heels end up looking cool and not dastardly or just evil. And I think with McIntyre, yeah, it's funny to look at him on social media, but the dude, his character is just an outright scumbag. And I think that's how you build faces. That's why Roman Reigns worked, because you legitimately hated the guy. And that's how you can build a Cody. I just think that character work has been tremendous.
And I certainly hope that he's able to come to some agreement to stay in WWE, because obviously a Punk McIntyre feud somewhere down the road is going to be red hot. And I think there's a lot of possibilities when they get to that point. But again, shout out to Damian Priest having his moment. Just the whole press conference afterward, you can just tell this guy's ready to be the face of a company. Right alongside Cody, and going to do a lot of good work. So I'm really excited to see what his reign looks like.
One more thing about Priest real quick is that, we talk about Gunther a lot as far as body transformation and what they've done for themselves. But if you look at an old picture of Damian Priest and what he's done, they kind of asked him to reflect on his journey to get here. And he basically said, if I can do this, anyone can. And I don't think maybe we give him enough credit for the work he put in to build himself into the man he is now. And I think I wasn't really impressed with him when I saw him on Ring of Honor TV, but when we saw him live and in person at All In, I think, you kind of got it. And clearly that even at that point, that dude had put in a crazy amount of work.
Yeah, it was definitely only a matter of time at that point. And certainly WWE got a hold of him and get him into the system and now is the world heavyweight champion. So congratulations to everybody involved in that opening match. Congratulations are also in order to Bayley, as Bayley and Iyo Sky had that tough spot where they were the semi-main event. They went on before the craziness that was the main event. And maybe from a wrestling standpoint, put on the match of the weekend. I thought it was really outstanding. Iyo Sky, if she's not the best women's wrestler in the world, she's in the top 3, I think, for sure, and has had a great title reign. And you really got to see those two and how good they are. And even Dave Meltzer, who we certainly take some fun at on this podcast and certainly sometimes deservedly so, referred to it as like a stardom match where there wasn't any nonsense, there wasn't any interference. It was just a great wrestling match that in the end, Bayley gets the win and Bayley gets her moment. It was great to see the crowd pop for her because, like she said in the post-match press conference, you just don't know because she's been a heel for so long, and Iyo Sky is really popular because she's so good. But the fans went along with it, and we're really happy to see Bayley win, and you could tell she was really happy to have that moment as well. We're going to start with Chris on this one. Your thoughts on the WWE Women's Championship match that went to Bayley over Iyo Sky?
Yeah, it started out a little bit slower than a lot of the other matches here, but I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. It definitely ramped up. It did a lot of things well. Like you mentioned, there were no interferences. I was sure there was going to be some kind of damage control interference, but I'm actually glad there wasn't. They just let them go out there and do what they do best. Really appreciated the underhanded tactic from Iyo Sky of kind of feigning, like, please let's be friends or whatever, and then following it up with a strike after that. I feel like that was done harkening back to that Uso match again. That is how you pull that off, not necessarily how the Usos did it. I was a little worried at the start because this was the third match on just night 2 where they were focusing on somebody's legs and making that the main focal point. Bayley kind of hurting her leg on a dive through the ropes, and then Iyo Sky picking that apart. And we'd already seen it in the LA Knight fight prior, and then the Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins, obviously with him being injured from the night before. But I don't think they did it enough to where it was cheesy. I think it was believable, and they just put on a clinic. Iyo Sky's just multiple moonsaults. I was all there for it. They just absolutely impressive.
Yeah, I thought it was just another outstanding wrestling match between two of the very best in the world, and great to see people recognizing that Bayley is among the best in the world, because it's always felt like she didn't get the same respect that Charlotte or Sasha Banks got. And tonight she was able to kind of show everybody what she can do. Mike, we'll go to you next for your thoughts.
I think it shows you the importance of these post-PLE press conferences, too, because I think there are times where maybe you might feel a certain way about a wrestler, but to have the people who write it essentially come out and reinforce what you think. I think we've all kind of felt like at times Bayley has been overshadowed by maybe more of the larger than life members of the Four Horsewomen and even some of the other wrestlers that aren't a part of that group. Or maybe they've brought in people like a Ronda Rousey who just was going to be, front and center, and Bayley kind of gets overlooked. I think for them to kind of validate that and tell you, yeah, we know that's how it's been, but she is seriously one of the best we have. Much deserved. I thought overall this was a better wrestling match than the other women's title match. I think maybe some of that has to do with Becky Lynch being under the weather, maybe just the contrast in styles between her and Rhea Ripley. Iyo Sky and Bayley are two of the best at it, and that was just a tremendous match.
Yeah, it totally was. And again, great to see that the crowd gave Bayley her moment as well, singing the UK Bayley song, basically cheering her on, and just great to see her have that WrestleMania moment. And it's her first title win at a WrestleMania, which is certainly something that wasn't lost on her fans as well. Rachel, your thoughts on the match?
I mean, pretty much everything you guys have said is what I wrote down. Like, she has been, like, what Triple H said even during the press conference, how she's just been so constant and so steady. And all the girls were waiting for her, you know, after the match, and they were so excited that she won. Like, obviously, a lot of people respect Bayley. And I think a lot of people forget how good she is. And obviously, Iyo Sky, she's the genius of the sky. So she's fantastic. And I knew the match was going to be good. I'm glad it lived up to what I thought. And I think Bayley deserves all her flowers.
Yeah, no question about that. And it was great to see so many people sending her messages of congratulations after the match was completed. But a really great women's title match that goes to Bayley. Back into the lightning round for one more match, and it was the 6-person Philadelphia street fight that involved the Final Testament and the Pride. They're sometimes referred that way, although they never get referred that way on screen. I don't know if it's ever going to be their official name. I kind of wonder how long the group's going to last now, but that's another story for another time. I just kind of think every group that runs into Karrion Kross, usually something happens to them moving forward. And I think we've had some teasing on social media, Bobby Lashley maybe taking a more aggressive stance because a lot of the people that were in these main events, he's beaten. So we'll see how that goes. But it was an entertaining match with Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits getting the win. Bubba Ray Dudley as a special guest referee, which provided some really outstanding fun moments in that match. Not a real long match. I think it was 8 or 9 minutes, but I think it got done when it needed to get done. Rachel's going to take this one in the lightning round. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, like you said, it did everything it needed to do. Bubba Ray being the referee was great. Getting the moment where they do get the tables with Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits. Having Snoop Dogg on commentary was way more entertaining than I ever would have imagined it to be. It's like nobody really cared what he said. So he literally said anything that came to his mind. I liked seeing Angelo Dawkins run it back like he did last year, where he ran around the ring and literally just crashed into someone like a freight train. I love that moment last year. Montez Ford with his high flying is always amazing. It was cool to see. I mean, I like the fact that the heels got the offense right away and they just literally beat them with kendo sticks for a few minutes. I do feel bad for Karrion Kross, who literally ended up getting beat a million times with the kendo stick because the one table broke right before they were going to put him on it. But it was literally everything I figured a Philadelphia straight fight would be. The faces came out on top. It was very entertaining.
Yeah, I think for what it was and kind of needing that match in that spot to kind of cool things off and get the crowd kind of settled back in, I thought it did what it needed to do, and certainly was an entertaining match. Really, every match on the card was at the very least entertaining, and in some cases among the best either matches or moments that WrestleMania has seen in quite some time. Before we get to the MVPs of the night, kind of want to throw another question to each of you just for a short answer. We'll start with Chris. Where does WWE go from here? What is next? What do you think this new era is going to start to look like? Because I'm honestly very excited to see whether it's the Triple H era or whatever you want to call it, what that's going to look like. What do you think it's going to look like?
I don't know how you follow that. I think that was the first thing I said before we started this. I think they've done well to already have so much anticipation and potential fights for the World Heavyweight Championship. I'd like to see them take Gunther once he has some time off with his new kid and kind of work him up into that picture. That's definitely a must at this point. Main thing is these big baby faces that have gotten these titles, they need to set up some believable matches, make them look strong. The Sami Zayns, the Cody Rhodes, all this time that we've been waiting to, especially in Cody's case, give them the championship. We've got to kind of defend it, make it believable, and make sure that all this work done by Roman Reigns wasn't for nothing. So heavy focus right there.
Yeah, definitely. Rachel, your thoughts on what's coming in this new era?
I'm beyond excited for this new era. I've been feeling that all weekend, this new energy. I can't wait to see what other wrestlers that we've all kind of talked about, they could be championship material, but Vince would never put them in that position. I'd like to see who they put in that position, who ends up being the next ones to step up. I see a lot more. I mean, Cody being the fighting champion as opposed to Roman was just not. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I'm so excited.
Mike, we've got the Raw after WrestleMania coming in less than 24 hours time. That's going to start that where do we start from here on that first night, and where do we go from here in that new era?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, what do you do with Damian Priest right now? Who's his first challenger? I mean, you could easily have some infighting in the Judgment Day, perhaps. Maybe give him Balor to start out with. You could, and I don't know if they plan on doing anything roster wise, because you have people like Andrade, you have Kevin Owens, you have Randy Orton. What's their next move? Elevating them to a top level feud certainly wouldn't be a bad move. And as far as Cody goes, they just gave AJ Styles new entrance music. To me, that speaks like, hey, we have plans for this guy coming out of WrestleMania. So even though he lost at Mania, you can't help but think there's a bigger plan for him too. So we'll see.
I know there's already rumors, or I don't think they've set a concrete date, but I believe there's going to be a draft coming up in the next few weeks. So that will be interesting. The other thing to consider too, which we'll probably talk more about next week, is who from NXT is on the way up, because you've got Carmelo Hayes and you've got Trick Williams and you've got some women that could be on the way up as well. It's going to be very interesting to see what the rosters look like here in a couple of weeks when all this shakes out. It is time to get to our MVPs of the night. Chris has already cheated and gave us his MVP right off the bat with Roman Reigns, and certainly a great choice. Let's start with Mike tonight with his MVP of the night.
Ooh, man, that is a difficult one, because it would be so easy. Obviously, with Chris going with Roman, it'd be so easy to say Cody because he finished the story. That is what it is. But I'm going to go with Seth Rollins, actually. Man pulled double duty tonight, even in a limited capacity. He pulled 2 matches at WrestleMania. The dude has worked so hard, and he hasn't been 100%. He did what he needed to do to open WrestleMania after closing it the night before. I hope he takes some time off, gets fully recovered, and comes back and does something big, because the guy's been such a huge deal. He built a title out of nothing and made it worth something. What else can you say? Yeah,
no question about that. I know you stole Rachel's pick based on the look on her face.
Oh, man.
And he's another dude who has a contract coming up, so certainly be interesting to see what that new contract looks like for him. But
is there a rule that we can't pick the same person?
There's not. I mean, You could, but it's up to you. But we'll leave that for Rachel.
I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, I mean, there are no rules. We're just making this up as we go. So, Rachel, who's your pick for MVP of the night?
Well, I mean, other than Seth Rollins, I'm going to go Bayley, because they could have easily kind of put her aside after the whole her and Sasha Banks ordeal with the tag titles a long time ago, when they threw like a hissy fit. But while she has been forgotten by with Charlotte and Becky, she's just stayed. She's trusted the system, and now she's able to enjoy all the work that she's put in after all these years.
Yeah, it's a great choice. Bayley certainly getting that nod. You would think now I would have to go with Cody, because, of course, nobody's picked Cody yet. But Cody got his flowers tonight. He won. He finished his story. So I don't feel like he needs my MVP vote. The person I'm going to choose for MVP is a man by the name of Lee Fitting. Lee Fitting was hired by WWE to replace Kevin Dunn. And Kevin Dunn had a way of doing things. And some of the things that Kevin Dunn did were good. I think he gets a lot of criticism, and rightfully so, for some of the very bad tropes. But there were a lot of really good shots over the years that he engineered. So I don't want to just totally dump on him. But the change in the presentation in WWE since Lee Fitting took over, and it was very noticeable the last 2 nights of WrestleMania, the camera shots, the long protracted camera shots, the different angles, the lack of cuts, trying to stay on shots for a longer period of time. And as Triple H said afterward, there's more changes to come. They didn't want to just roll it all out at once. They wanted to kind of ease out these changes over time, but it is night and day different watching WWE's product right now from a visual standpoint. And that is another element in telling a story, is the visuals have to make it pleasing to watch. And I think the work that he's already done with his production team has made WWE so much easier to watch. And I'm excited to see where they go from here, because I think it could really take WWE's presentation to a totally different level.
Yeah, just kind of my input on kind of both of your picks. I think with Bayley, they've finally given us a reason to care about her beyond just, hey, we remember we liked her in NXT. They put her in a storyline, and I think that's made her it feels like they've invested in her, so there's a reason for us to invest in her. And I think that's a big difference there. And as far as Lee Fitting goes and the camera work, it's not necessarily a wrestling thing. I think it's a business thing, where it's when you've been on top for so long, that doesn't mean you stop innovating. And I think with WWE for so many years, it felt like they just quit. Like they knew what they were doing. They knew their product had this level of success, and there was no reason to take chances or do new things. And you kind of get the feeling from Triple H in the press conference tonight that that's not how things are anymore. We're going to keep trying new things and innovating and doing what top companies in other industries do.
Yeah, no question about it. Triple H saying that, he's walking out on the floor and it's like he wants all the ideas. If some camera person or some floor director comes to him and says, hey, we should try this thing, he's like, all right, let's try it. That's a totally different mindset than what was there before. And I think that's why you're going to see WWE get to an even higher level. Time for final thoughts from this WrestleMania weekend. We'll start with Chris in Parts Unknown. Chris, what's your final thoughts on WrestleMania?
This is the culmination of me getting back into wrestling between the podcast. I know I missed last WrestleMania and a couple of the initial pay-per-views after that, picking up with Great American Bash. But this is where it's all been leading, and I couldn't be happier to be back watching the product that I used to love so much and fell away from. It's hooked me back in, and it's better than it's ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it continues to go, and we're happy to have you back in the product and in this podcast as well. Rachel, your thoughts?
I think Triple H said it best when he said that they're just having fun. And because they're having fun, we can have fun. And it's translating across the storylines and just the production, everything. It's just fun and you feel it. That's why I think we're all so excited, because it feels new. And that's what I felt like this WrestleMania was. It was just a whole new chapter to the story that we've been in. I mean, us three, we've watched since we were little kids. And it's just exciting to see where they go next.
No question about that. It is fun to be a wrestling fan once again. Mike, take us home. Your final thoughts from WrestleMania.
I feel like it's been years now that people have promised us they were going to change the world. And maybe finally we're getting to see some of that, just not from where we thought we would. But I'm excited.
Yeah, no question about it. I think it's going to be a very interesting few days and weeks to come. And we're excited to get a chance to talk about it right here on the Nerdcast Empire. And that is going to wrap things up for tonight's podcast. A huge thanks to everybody for joining me again late night. We're in the early morning hours of Monday morning, and certainly appreciate them taking the time out to help record this podcast. A big thanks to everybody that's listened and shared our podcast. We really appreciate that. Big thanks to Stove Leg Media for their continued support of our podcast. Remember, just a few hours time, we've got the next episode of Music Mondays. Do not miss that episode. It's just jam-packed with some great music this week. Check that out in just a few hours here on the Nerdcast Empire. It's going to wrap things up. We'll be back in just a few hours with another edition. But until then, for the entire crew, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.